Well, I think we were treated to two very impressive presentations from active users of this particular software. I have a few questions, and I've gathered a few questions from folks on the moderation panel here. I just want to check one thing to see if I have one coming up right here. Well, here's a great question. Well, all the questions are great, but before I get to my questions, I'll just open this question right now to everyone, well, to both of our speakers. And the question was, what you're showing me looks pretty good, particularly for central canal stenosis and the state of the discs. Is there any, does the software now, or is there any plan for the software to, in the future, address the facet pathology itself in terms of quantification and identification? Either one of you, if Johan or Peter, either of you have an answer, just go ahead and chime right in. Don't be shy.
I think Johan is more also in the development of this. As I show you, we're using a software version for clinical use, but also a software version not for clinical use. And here we also work on the facet joint hypertrophy and also on the neuroforamen. But I think Johan is more involved in this project.
No, I can only affirm that the facet joint hypertrophy is ready, but to use this software clinically, there needs to be regulatory clearance, which is not yet there. But I think NET maybe has a more precise timeline there.
Ned, if you're talking, you're muted. If you're not talking, maybe because you're not prepared to answer the question at this point in time, but we can certainly make sure we supply that answer going forward, maybe when you collect yourself. So, Johan, you showed the broader range of applications in that phase 2 and that version 2, and that certainly gets a lot closer to what all the things that a radiologist needs to produce on a day-to-day report. Do you see anything that's still missing, that's glaring for you, that prevents that would be the tipping point for making this a routine everyday tool? Is there something else you'd add?
Thank you for that question, Larry. So we've been using version 1, which is quite accurate and easy to use. But as you just mentioned, we are eagerly waiting for functions or detection of pathologies or segmentation in the next version, facet joints, foraminal stenosis, modic changes, and we're still missing those, and I still need to add those to my report. It will be a great benefit when the clearance is in and we can use that in our next version. And again, I hope that will be this summer. I've seen the product. It does work. Modic changes are not so easy, only looking at T1s and T2s. And I think stir imaging will need to come into the picture too in the future.
Oh, I mean, I might add a diffusion in for the spine. You never know when you might want to see a call sign once in a while. I think that's wonderful. We have a comment from another early user, my good friend Dr. Bash, who said that she'd like to see the lateral recess nerve root impingement also highlighted in terms of the capabilities. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with that, but the more specialized you get, the harder it gets for radiologists, the harder it gets for software too. Lateral recess stenosis, there are some scoring systems for that, but it's more difficult. And I hope the software will actually help us there and also standardize it a little bit more. And again, you can tweak this software if you think like central spinal stenosis has something to do with surface area, diameters, or the ratio between rootlets and CSF. It's whatever you want as a group that can be implemented.
I think when you evaluate a tool like this, there's a couple, any AI tool, but certainly tools that are going to live within the imaging workflow, there's a couple of key concepts. One is that it's got to make you more efficient. And I'm going to ask both of you to talk about how you see that playing out. And the other one is you've got to trust the results. And how do you feel about that playing out? Now, I understand it's in various stages of actual clinical implementation because of regulatory issues, but can you just opine a bit as to how that plays out for you and how you see this playing out over the next period of time?
I can see how it works in my hospital, Larry. Whenever the fellows or the residents, and we have 3 of those young people, use this software, they make better reports. They save time, they make better reports. When I use the system, I think of myself as being a spine imager, more or less. I have fairly high expectations, and I think this version of the software is not where my expectations are yet, because NOT is not doing a good job, because it's still missing some features. And I hope again that after summer things will be better. But for the young radiologists, this is really a great tool to start off with. That's my impression.
I can only underline what Johan is saying. So the three major things we're missing is the facet joint hypertrophy, but with the new version, it looks very good. Foramen stenosis, and demotic changes. However, since in our group we are very experienced, so we do really a lot of lumbar spine images. You can imagine in private practice, it's our daily clinical routine, and as you can see, also with this version of the software, it's possible to save time. Also, when you're experienced, you can save time. And on the other hand, which is what's very important, is since we have 15 to 20 radiologists working in the group, and everyone has its own way to dictate lumbar spine. And when you use the software, you're really standardized. And I think it's a little bit, when you look at, for example, we choose the segmental method, that you look at the different segmental levels, and for all our people that send us the patients, I think it's really beneficial that every report that goes out of our group is structured the same way, and the reports and the terms they're using are always the same. So I think the standardization is also very beneficial when you use the software. And it doesn't matter from which radiologist it comes. Yeah, the report is
okay. I think that's wonderful. I have a couple of points. One is, you say new radiologists because you're training young folks, and I think that's a very important niche. But we have to be aware that in many practices around the world, a neuroradiologist isn't necessarily available to read the scans in 100% of cases, and you might translate the benefits in inexperienced radiologists to the experience that, say, non-neuroradiology specialists might have. That's my first point. The second point is that you can see why I covered the concept of segmentation being a great strength of AI. You can see a lot of what we're doing here is leaning on the segmentation and its ability to do a really fairly spectacular job delineating and segmenting these structures. Now, if you asked me what feature is missing, I would tell you about my greatest pain point, and that is interval change between exams. Now, this is a very exciting time, at least in the U.S., but frankly, all different catchment areas tend to go to the same direction. The American AMA, AMA is American, but and essentially, right behind that, CMS has for the first time endorsed a CPT code for quantitative imaging tools that do longitudinal surveillance. Okay, for the first time, they have said there is a dedicated code for quantitation and longitudinal surveillance in neuro. So to me, the greatest pain point in spine imaging is differentiating between visit 1 and visit 2, particularly when there is pathology present at multiple levels. So while this is an inherently a great strength of segmentation, what I'd like to see is for someone to go into that 85-year-old, 5'2" woman with multi-level degenerative disease and spinal stenosis and tell me why she's back with symptoms this time as a differentiator. Do you see any potential for this tool to help you detecting things you might miss or things you might miss in terms of interval change? at some point when this capability is available?
If I can give my opinion, Larry, I think I couldn't agree more. You know, we have these elderly people that have multi-level degenerative pathology, but they come in with one complaint. It might be like, I don't know, an L4 radicular pain on the left. They don't complain about all of the other levels. They don't complain sometimes about lumbar spine. And then 3 years later, they come with a new complaint. And then you have to compare this multi-level degenerative spine with the previous one, with the report that you didn't make. And you make a completely different report because you're a different radiologist. The referring physician doesn't know tail or end of this. Like, where does it start? Where does it change? I think it's very important to have this software which is so consistent every time that it makes the same report, and it will be able to say what the difference is between two scans in two different time points. I couldn't agree more. That's something which is very boring for us to do and which AI is very good at.
Yeah,
So go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
Same for me. I mean, this is really that's yeah, one of the boring parts of the job. That in lumbar spine, you do exactly as Johan said, that you have an examination from a different hospital or different private practice. You have to compare it, and I think here is really would be really beneficial, especially when you have a structured report like it comes out from CoLumbo. That's easier to compare.
So my other question is that, you know, each one of us in our soul believes that our reports are perfectly designed. Okay. We like the style, we like the structure, we like the phraseology. How much customization of the CoLumbo output is available, and how much is necessary, in your opinion, when you use this as you look to putting this to work in everyday practice? Peter, why don't you lead off with that one, since you seem to be closest to making this work every day yourself?
I think that the most important part is that you have to be very open. You have to be first very open that you start using AI. Yeah, that's the first step. Yeah, that you're open-minded and say, okay, I'm open-minded. I'm an experienced radiologist, 25 years, and I'm still open to use AI. And then you cannot stick to your report that you make for 25 years. You cannot do this when you have an algorithm like CoLumbo. We're using 10 to 15 different AI systems in our clinical practice. So you have to adopt a little bit with an open mind and say, okay, I've never done before I start using CoLumbo, I've never done a segmental report. I always reported for me the most important pathology first. And now I said, no, I think it's a good way. It's a good way for standardization. And you have to be open-minded if you start using a software like CoLumbo, or if you use a report that comes from an AI, and if you want to train the AI to your report, you will not succeed. You have to be open and say, okay, I change my reporting because I think that's the better way, and that's improvement in radiology, and that we get all better and get more standardized, and not stick to your report since you learned it since 20 or 25 years.
I think, Larry, there are two things. SmartStuff promised me that there are two versions actually available. One is level by level, and they would also have available a report now which goes pathology by pathology. So it will first describe the discs, then the spinal stenosis, then the hernia. So the two major ways to make a report. The second thing is, of course, again, the young people that come in their first years of residency, they don't care. They don't have a structure. Whatever you present them, they will use. So it's not difficult to convince them to use something like AI. They're eager to do it. They're young. They're used to it. For older people, you can either adapt to one of the two formats of your report. It doesn't need that much adaptation. And I think even people that are using the same layout for 20 or 30 years easily will change in a few weeks. It's not so difficult. That's my take.
Yeah. Honestly, I think you are seeing changes in the way we report. People are moving more and more to structured reports, and that required some change from the way we perhaps started when we were young. Now, I like to think of myself as a young radiologist, but the AI keeps rejecting my assertion, so that's a problem. So here's the other question: assuming that you've given your referring physicians some exposure to the reports as modified by CoLumbo's influence, has there been any reaction from your surgeons and physiatrists in terms of the value of this report? While you're thinking about that, because if you look at it, I'm not a measurer, right? In my practice, never did. I was a mild, moderate, and severe. I was a very detailed level by level guy, but I never put numbers on my pathology. This would immediately add the numbers to my pathology. And I imagine for one or both of you, it might be the same. So have you gotten any reaction from the ultimate consumers of the report?
Well, to be honest, we are not exposing our physicians to the CoLumbo report as it is, but of course they are exposed to the report as it is changed by, again, the young radiologist. And to be very honest, me personally, I haven't heard any feedback yet from, but we had to wait for the Dutch report. We are using it like only the last months, so that's fairly recent, but I have had no feedback yet from the referring physicians on that.
I have a little bit feedback from CoLumbo, but since we are using also different other AI tools in also for measurements, like for whole spine X-ray or something like this, and our referring physicians, they love those measurements because they're accurate, they're repeatable, they're standardized. And I'm sure they will also love the measurements from CoLumbo, because they are not used that they have a really nice measurements of extrusion and everything. So I'm sure that they will love it, but they will not call and say, okay, it's great now. I think it works a little bit the other way around. When you then have an radiologist who is not reporting measurements, I'm sure they will call and say, hey, in all the other reports you have measurements. I want the measurements as well. I think this is maybe the way it will work, that they get used to the measurements and then will complain if they don't have measurements.
Well, I think it's all been very illuminating, actually. Even though I'm familiar with the product, I learned some things today, and it's really quite exciting to hear the reaction of both of our speakers this afternoon. I'd like to say on behalf of CoLumbo, as the folks at SmartSoft and the folks that make CoLumbo, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time around the world to join us and hear these presentations. I would like to say that if you look under the chat section of this session, a lot of the operational questions that have come up have been answered live. I see questions about additional languages and how these things would be set up, including even some questions as to how you might set up an opportunity to test the software or learn more about it. Please check this chat section. But we're just coming to the top of the hour, and I think this would be a good time to say thank you. Thank you for all the positive comments I see in the chat. And thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the folks who joined us. And enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or morning, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. Thank you very much.
Thank you for moderating, Larry, and thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you also from my side for being part of this webinar. It was a very good experience, and have a nice evening from Linz, from Austria.